when two countries agree to recognize each other, they establish either embassies or consulates. And they could have a resident or a non-resident ambassador. Ambassador means the representative of the head of state of the sending country to the receiving country. They could exchange ambassadors because this relationship means that when one country establishes an ambassador, an embassy in another country, that other country also has a right to establish an embassy in the other country. Now, in Kenya, when Kenya became independent in 1963, that is the first time the flag was put up and the British flag came down. We became independent. We did not quite become a republic until a year later. Now, many countries started recognizing Kenya as soon as it became independent after 12th of December 1963. And they followed very quickly. And the first country to recognize the independence and the sovereignty of the Republic of Kenya was the Federal Republic of Germany, German today. And when countries establish relationship, there are certain privileges that they grant to each other. One of them is immunity from legal action in the country of residence of the ambassador. And also, there must be an identity for the property and the vehicles. So the vehicles used by the ambassador must be recognized and identified clearly, and the law enforcement agencies of the host country also are trained. Like in Kenya, we now have a diplomatic police unit which takes care of the safety and security of the diplomatic community, because now we have a lot of embassies here. So the Germany at that time was called the Federal Republic of Germany and constituted half of what is today the Federal Republic. But it was a country. So they became country number one, and their vehicles are identified as 1CD here. CD is a French, is in French, meaning consular diplomatic. Corps diplomatic, that means diplomatic corps. There is an agreement between countries that was reached in Vienna. It's governed, it is overseen by the United Nations, which establishes how countries are going to relate to each other once they establish diplomatic relations. And one of them is to identify property and personalities that are going to be deployed in the embassies and consulates. Now, let me just say that an embassy is the main office, which must always be in the capital city of the country receiving the ambassador. And the country sending the ambassador may also open other sub-offices that's why you hear of a German consulate in Mombasa or Kisumu, as the need may be, because they may have need to look after their interests in different parts of the country, and they may open offices which are sub-offices of the embassy known as consulates. Now, the second country to recognize Kenya as a sovereign and independent country was Russia. At that time, it was called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, or simply the Soviet Union. It was country number 2. And in Nairobi, when you walk around in a city, you may find cars bearing 2CD, and that 2CD belongs to to Russia. Now, the third country in the series to recognize Kenya was Ethiopia. Ethiopia now is number 3, and their vehicles are recognized as 3CD. Let's go back a bit to the language of diplomacy, which is recognized as French internationally. And as I said, relations are governed by a treaty which was signed by all the nations and is governed by the United Nations. Now, CD again is called diplomatic, and the consular offices, which are the sub-offices or branches of embassies, the offices are there and the vehicles there, you see them bearing CC, which is consular call consulaire in French. And the CD is called diplomatic. Now, as we go along with the countries recognizing Kenya, number 4 was the People's Republic of China. And you find their vehicles in town or in the country when they are going on about their business, 4CD, that is the People's Republic of China. And the vehicle carrying the ambassador and also bearing the flag of the nation will be 4CD 1K. That means vehicle number 1 of the fleet that they own. And they have a series extending to how many, like the Americans have a lot of vehicles and British and so on. And you will see them with a series like that. So we move on, and the country number 5 was Norway, the Kingdom of Norway. This was the first European country to recognize Kenya, the Kingdom of Norway. And they are 5CD. So you find them in the country when they're driving around, you see 5CD, so many K. With the ambassador, 5CD, 1K.
So, what number is Britain?
Britain is number 22nd to recognize. And the reason being that when we attained independence, the first independence in 1963, we were not a republic. And we had a prime minister as head of government. And the head of state remained, he was called the Governor General, representing the Queen of England for 1 year. So the arrangement for independence was that first, on June 1, 1963, we would gain independence. Madaraka, this is a promotion, but not full independence, but we had a prime minister. Now, on December 12, 1963, after 6 months of independence, of self-government, we became independent. And the first time the Kenya flag was flown and the British flag came down at Uhuru Gardens was on that date. Now, we didn't have a head of state as a president because we were not a republic yet. The republic came on the 12th of December the following year, 1964. During that time, the whole year, the Queen of England continued to remain as the head of state of Kenya, and she was represented in this country by the Governor General. And it so happened that the former governor of the colonial state of Kenya was transformed into a Governor General because Kenya did not mind, and they found him acceptable as a person to continue as a Governor General. Now, Britain, having a Governor General and Queen of England as the head of state, could not establish diplomatic relations with Kenya because it was in charge of Kenya still. And as a result, other countries recognized Kenya much earlier than the British government could and established relations, as I have been enumerating, much earlier. And so it happened that Britain could only recognize and open an embassy or a high commission. And the high commission and the embassies I will explain in a minute. After that is, the British could only open a diplomatic mission after we became a republic. And by that time, 21 countries had already recognized Kenya and established diplomatic missions in Nairobi. So it is normal for countries to look for a location in a certain region of the world where they can cover a number of countries, from where they can cover their interests in a number of countries. And Nairobi has played that role. So many countries in the world have established offices, diplomatic offices in Nairobi for their regional activities. And also there is another factor, the fact that the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and UN Habitat are centered in Nairobi, where every country in the world who are members of the United Nations have representation. They find that they could establish both diplomatic relations with Kenya, serving Kenya, as well as looking after their interest in the UNEP and Habitat. Wow.
So Kenya has diplomatic relations with over 100 countries.
Over, yes. It's not exactly the fact that we have a number of countries establishing relations here does not mean that we don't have relations with those that have not. When you see an ambassador or embassy in a building, is because that country has decided to have a diplomatic presence in Nairobi. Therefore, there are countries who recognize Kenya and with whom we have relations, but they don't have a resident ambassador. And there are many countries in the world where Kenya has interest, but has no resident ambassador. You can have relations without a physical presence in this country, and that is the case with Kenya. So Kenya has relations with everybody, literally, in the world. I think the only country I can think about for now is probably North Korea.
Okay, good to know. And as we conclude, what is the difference between an embassy, high commission, consulate?
All right. Let me start with an embassy. An embassy is the main office of an ambassador with his staff. He has attaches, he has a commercial attaché who looks after their trade and business interests in the country. There could be an education attaché because we have relations in the education sector. There could be others. And at the same time, the ambassador, the embassy, that country sending the ambassador, may have interests in different parts of Kenya. For example, Mombasa is a major international port, and ships which fly the flags of those nations sometimes come and change crews in Mombasa. And countries find it convenient to have a diplomatic presence in Mombasa. Many of them do, particularly from Europe, to serve the interest of their shipping industry. So you have a consulate there, which is a branch office of the embassy, and an officer who has diplomatic immunity in that country serving as a consul. Sometimes the appointing country can appoint a Kenyan or a national of the country of residence to represent that country's interest as a consul. And an example I can list is because Kenya, for example, doesn't have an embassy in Lebanon, but has a consul general who is not Kenyan, but they are in Lebanon and they do the job of an ambassador. That is part of the international relations. It is agreed. He looks after Kenya. I mentioned Lebanon because some Kenyans need consular support to be repatriated because of the troubles that are there. Now, High Commissioner or High Commission, it was agreed by the former British colonies and Britain itself that there should be a special relationship, not just enough as an ambassador, but closer. So the British government established the Commonwealth. It used to be called the British Commonwealth. But as time has gone, it is no longer British Commonwealth. It is the Commonwealth. And they have many things they do together. So most former colonies of Britain in Africa, in the Caribbean, and many other places appoint High Commissioner. They agreed that the ambassadors will bear the name of High Commissioner. So they have High Commissioner, and their offices, their embassies are known as High Commission. So here, that's where you find the British High Commission, Ghanaian High Commission, Zimbabwe High Commission, South African High Commission. And then you find that with Ethiopia, we are saying Embassy of Ethiopia, Embassy of Sudan, Embassy of Somalia, because they were not, those with embassies were not former British colonies. But anyone who was related to Britain before independence, their relationship with each other are through high commissioners. And there is a Commonwealth Summit, which they hold. They have programs and things they do together as a Commonwealth. There is also the Commonwealth Games, which are held every 4 years. And so cultural relations, you have Britain here with the British Council, and they have a lot of scholarships and so on. So the old contacts as a colony, Britain maintains this, and the colonies also have come together. They have common things, among them, of course, the English language and culture. So they have high commissioners instead of ambassadors.